Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Bob Kincaid, and welcome to a Wednesday edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Today is the 14th day of December in the year 2016. For me, it's a momentous day. I'm finally back, I think. I don't know if I'm here all the way, but I really did feel very, very pushed to try to do a program today. I don't want to go into a long weekend and look forward to next week's programs, not having been on for this long a period. So I thought that, I really did want to try to do a live program today. And hopefully, it'll be worth your while. I hope so. I will apologize for the fact that I've had this nagging, horrendous chest cold and cough. And that's mostly the reason that I've been reluctant to do programs, because once I get into these coughing fits, I can't, it's really a very, very deep, pronounced cough, and you can't do it on the air. You just can't talk. And I've had issues of shortness of breath and those kinds of things associated with it. And it just wasn't conducive to live broadcasting. So, and that's mainly the reason. It's been a long time since I've had, anything hit me quite this hard. And of course the irony was that for most of the period my wife was ill as well. Hers was not the same thing. She's had a sinus infection, but she was going to one doctor and I was heading in the other direction to mine, and we would kind of share notes and medications in the evening, and it's been a chore. But I think more than anything else, I've missed these broadcasts and these opportunities to just get together and exchange information and those kinds of things. And I just want to, first of all, thank everybody for your kind thoughts and words. I've got a number of emails from people encouraging me to, take it easy and get back when you're up to it and that kind of thing. And I really do appreciate it. And then I've heard from a couple of folks that I never heard from before, so I didn't even know that they were out there. Talking about how they missed the programs, and I got one very, very interesting email from a listener who listens on the podcasts from somewhere in the Middle East, and talking just about how difficult it is, that open conversation there is really difficult. So it's listening to these podcasts that this person kind of really thrives upon, and talked about how much, how important they were to people that even if they have to listen, they can't listen live, obviously, and can't call in. But it really did make me feel good, and you don't need too many of those to make you realize that you might, you're doing something right, hopefully, and that's kind of what keeps you going. And I just I've been keeping up with Bob on Facebook and emails and phone conversations and various other things most days, and I just want everybody to know that being back here is one of the most important things right now going on in my life, and I just want to let people know that I appreciate them. I appreciate Bob Kincaid and Annette and the folks at Head On for their willingness to put up with me and their willingness to keep a program like this on the air, because I do think it's so important. I think there's so much going on. I've been collecting materials during the time that we've not been doing live broadcasts, and I've got quite a trash bin full of materials. Some of it's become outdated, some of it's not. And just going back over it and saying, this is still live, we missed this one, this kind of thing. I've been doing a little bit of that. So I do believe that the program, to a large degree, will be a lot of this, that, and the other thing. But at the same time, there are some really pertinent issues going on. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to get back on the air as quickly as we could. So thank you. I'll do the very best I can to not allow the program, my coughing breaks or whatever, to interfere with the flow of the program. I'll try to remember to disconnect my mic if that happens. So if you do hit a pause for for several seconds, you'll basically know what's going on and why that's happening. But again, thank you, and hopefully for the better part of the next couple of hours, we can begin together to address some issues that I think need to be addressed. First of all, let me first encourage you to feel comfortable calling into the program and sharing your thoughts. And I know that a lot of people out there have got to have thoughts and ideas about some of the things that are going on in this country right now as the events in Trump Towers. I mean, I've been to New York City a couple of times, and I'm trying to put Trump Towers in my frame of reference. I kind of know where it is, but I've never really looked for it. And I've been reading a lot about the security issues associated with Trump's intention to spend significant amounts of time as president at Trump Towers, and what that means in terms of the costs of security and all of that. I mean, it's incredible from everything that I'm reading, and that's something that I'd almost like to just go there and just get a firsthand view of, because Donald Trump is not the only thing that happens in that building. There are significant numbers of retail shops and stores and businesses located there. So the mere fact that the incoming president of the United States, does his business from there doesn't mean that the rest of the building is empty by any stretch. Life goes on there. And so for security people, that creates a tremendous problem. And I've speculated in my mind, as I read about these things, as to what it might be like. I know it's going to be quite expensive. But on the other hand, there are things about a pending Trump presidency that are going to be a lot more expensive, I'm afraid. So with that, let me share with you our phone number and invite you to feel free to pick up the phone and share your thoughts and your ideas on some of these pertinent issues of the day. The phone number, as you know, is area code 304-663-4676. That's 304-663-4676. My email address, and a number of you have chosen to use it, and I thank you for it. My email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien, OBRIEN 906, all one word, lowercase, @gmail.com. And finally, let me mention, as I often try every day to do, mention our Facebook page. If you are a regular user of Facebook, as millions and millions of people are, of course, billions, I guess, if you are a regular user of Facebook, you know that you go to the homepage, facebook.com, and at the top there's a search box. And if you type in the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution, you will be into our Facebook page. And I try to update it frequently with postings and links to particular articles that, in my course of my reading, things that I find interesting and that I assume that you might as well. Going through the programs as we do here at the Virtual Center, I know the issues that we've dealt with and the issues that we will be dealing with or that we should be dealing with. And so when I run across something in my reading that seems to be quite informative and worthwhile to know, to be familiar with, I try to share it with our Virtual Center family. So I'll usually post something on Facebook. The only thing that I've said, and I just want to reiterate this, is that I don't put anything on there unless I've read it myself. I'm not putting links to things on there that I haven't read. I don't think that that's fair. I think it's selfish because it basically says, I don't have the time to read this, but maybe these folks would want to read it. And that for me kind of suggests that my time's more valuable than yours, and it's not. And also that sometimes from the title of a piece, you really don't pick up the total substance of it. Sometimes the value of a piece is not even reflected in the title, because naturally, the person who wrote the article may think that the major point is one thing, but the people who read it may see other things in it that are much more important to them. So therefore, I try to read this stuff myself and to try to screen it in a way. And I don't mean screen it in terms of good or bad or censor it or anything like that. I try to basically make a couple of comments about what I see in the article that really makes me think you would be would do well to look at it. And then I leave it up to you. And if it indeed is a worthwhile piece and you feel obliged to comment on it, there's an opportunity to do that on Facebook. And then if you want to be a little bit more direct, you can obviously send me an email and make your comments directly to me via email. Or you can, of course, pick up the phone and call our number at 304-663-4676, and you can touch base with us that way. The point is that your comments are important, and not just to me, but to the other people that listen regularly to this program. I think the one thing we've learned over the nearly 4 years that we've been on is that we really all can learn and should learn from each other. And I consider myself part of that group. I know that to a large extent, it's an information-driven program. And basically what that means is that it frequently takes almost a lecture format in a college classroom. The nature of the beast kind of suggests that that's probably going to be true. And the other side of that coin is the fact that my whole background is from the higher education classroom. So therefore, the way I look at issues almost dictates that I look at them from that same perspective. So consequently, I know that the programs are information driven. And I'm usually trying to put out a lot of information and conceptual ideas and thoughts or whatever. Unlike a regular conversation program where people are exchanging opinions on things, it seems to me that my approach here is that we need to get some substance out there before we can even begin to talk about it. So I've seen my job over the months that we've been on as to generate some of that information and some of that data. And that's the way I see my job. I'll put it out there, and then I'd like us to engage it. And sometimes it happens, and listeners will call and we'll have an exchange. Frequently it doesn't happen, but I have a feeling, I have to believe, that it's valuable information nonetheless, and that it makes a contribution to one's overall understanding of the particular issue at hand. That's my goal. That's kind of what drives me, and I really encourage you to actively participate in it as you choose to do it, because ultimately this is your program, not mine. And I feel that when we don't have a program, as has been true over the last couple of weeks, I really feel that I'm kind of letting you folks down, and I don't really want to do that. I know realistically that a lot of this wasn't my fault and all of that, but still, at the same time, I feel that I do have a responsibility. I took it on. I take it very seriously, and when I can't follow through with it, it nags at me a bit, and I just want you to know that, because all of it speaks to how much I appreciate the opportunity to bring these things to you on a regular basis. And for that, again, Bob and the folks at Head On, I have to thank for that. So with that, let's touch on a couple of issues. The last issue that we were really dealing with before all of this hiatus began was the Electoral College. And of course, the irony of ironies is that that topic hasn't, over the last couple of weeks, gone away. If anything else, it's become more relevant than it ever was before. The Electoral College is scheduled to render its decision this coming Monday. And today, this is our final day of live broadcasting, our last opportunity before Monday. So if anything can and should happen related to the Electoral College, it needs to happen by Monday. Because on Monday, the Electoral College is scheduled to declare Donald Trump President of the United States. The votes will be counted in the U.S. Senate, and the announcement will be made that Donald Trump has received the requisite number of electoral votes to be listed as duly elected candidate for President of the United States. We spent quite a bit of time over the last month or so here at the Virtual Center on the Electoral College, what its initial purpose was. We talked about the absence of clear intent on the part of the founders. The one thing we did see, if you'll recall, was that Article 2 of the Constitution related to how we select the president is really one of the most convoluted portions of the Constitution itself. And what that convoluted nature to me speaks to is the fact that the founders didn't go in there with a particular intent about the election of the president. What they went into instead was the selection of the chief executive with a number of concerns and cautions. And Article 2 is written in a way which addresses those cautions. And so the assumption was going in, if I can have to use a play on words, so to speak, they almost went into the discussion of the Electoral College from the perspective of, we need to be careful of this, we need to be careful of that, we need to be careful of this third thing, we have to really watch out for this fourth thing, or whatever. So consequently, the phraseology of Article 2 was designed principally to address those concerns. Consequently, it's a little bit difficult in reading Article 2 to pick up on a clear intent. Instead, what makes it much more meaningful, it seems to me, is to go through the language of Article 2 as we did, and then address the dangers that that particular statement seemed to be intended to prevent, or to forestall, or to divert, or whatever the strategy was. The result was that Article 2 ended up being one of the least controversial aspects of the Constitution itself when it went out for ratification. There wasn't any concerted opposition to anything in Article 2. There were a number of concerns about whether it was going to work or not. But the thinking was that we did the best we could to cover our bases, to cover our tracks. And so all we can do now is see how it works, and if there are flaws in it, we'll fix it. And of course, ironically, that's exactly the same strategy the Federalists used about the whole Constitution. Because what they were trying to do more than anything else was to prevent the calling of a second convention. First of all, they were worried about the pressure to amend the Constitution before it had even gone into effect. And so supporters of the Constitution adopted the perspective, let's put it into effect, see how it works, the parts of it that don't work, we'll fix. But to go into the issue of amendments before it's even had a chance, many of the Constitution supporters argued, would be a little bit foolhardy, would be putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. Fact of the matter is, that rationale sounded good, but politically it didn't fly. Because the fact of the matter is, much of the focus on the Constitution and what was missing in the Constitution revolved around the issue of human rights, a Bill of Rights, or the lack thereof. The concern of most critics was that the Constitution didn't contain a Bill of Rights. But the reality is there were two different kinds. We've been through a lot of this before. I know this is all background, but I still think it's relevant information. There were really two issues going on in terms of flaws in the Constitution. One was the absence of a Bill of Rights protecting human rights. But the other strategy, the other issue, was much more substantive, much more structural. And that is that some opponents of the Constitution wanted to make amendments to the Constitution, all right, but their amendments would be structural and substantive. They weren't so much interested in the protection of human rights as they were in the potential power of the new government under the Constitution. Their priority was to do everything they could to limit that power. So the kind of amendments that these folks wanted would have effectively derailed the Constitution as it was drafted at the Philadelphia Convention. So when the first Congress met, it became very important to Madison and some of the other leading advocates of the Constitution. It became critical to them to separate those two issues. There was no way that Madison or other supporters of the Constitution were going to entertain amendments that would structurally alter the power and influence of the new government. And they quickly realized that the best way to do that, the best way to avoid those kinds of changes, was to give in on the other ones. Give in on the human rights amendments. If they want a Bill of Rights, let's give them one. But we'll decide what those amendments are going to be, not the critics of the Constitution. And that's a vital consideration, it seems to me, when you're proposing change.
Hey, Dr. Bill?
Yes, Bob?
You have a caller on the line. David is calling from Indianapolis for you.
Oh, my heavens. Okay.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I just started listening to your program a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's top-notch. But
Thank you.
My question was about...
Where do I send the check, David? I appreciate that comment so much. I'm just kidding. Thank you.
If Donald Trump needs to be removed at some point during his first term, how long would Pence potentially be able to serve? I thought it was 10 years, meaning Trump would have to be able to serve out the first 2 years, and then after that, if for whatever reason he dies or is removed from office, then Vice President Pence would then take over.
Would then be a candidate? Yes.
For two on his own.
Yes. The most he can serve is 2 terms. David, I'm absolutely not positively sure. You mentioned of 10 years because it seems to me the wording of two terms would seem to suggest 8 years. In other words, there's a possibility, and I don't know the answer. I just know the options.
Hey, Dr. Bill.
Yes, Bob.
I heard somewhere that after he wouldn't have been. I was talking to the gentleman before I was put on, and he brought up LBJ.
Right.
Not being barred from running for a second term on his own.
Right.
because
Good point. Good point. Yes, Bob, if you made that point, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up is, it was the Vietnam War that torpedoed LBJ's second run.
Exactly.
Not any constitutional bar.
Not right. So that would mean then that the total maximum time that one person could serve would be 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to check with you.
But on the other hand, I don't know. Let's assume that, and I'm just raising questions here. Let's assume that the president was impeached during his first term, but it wasn't after 2 years. Let's assume it was in the third year, or even at the start of the fourth year. Would that mean that the vice president would still be entitled to 2 full terms?
Yes.
I would think yes.
Yes. Okay. So 10 years is not the outside maximum either. I've never really thought about this.
Technically, the only maximum is the length of the term in which the vice president
is elected.
Steps into office. I mean, if Trump was to pull a William Henry Harrison, our shortest serving president, and catch pneumonia walking down Pennsylvania Avenue at his inauguration, and die 36 days later,
right?
Pence finishes out that term, then gets to run for 2 of his own if he so chooses.
Okay. This is a question I've never really thought about before. This is fabulous because I really hadn't thought about it. I just assumed that the maximum of 2 terms was is the issue that I've always gone with. But that's a great point. But getting money down Pennsylvania Avenue, and that's not in any way a strategy, is it?
No, it is strictly hypothetical. Because far be it from me to wish something like that on someone like that.
I know. Well, I'm if you hear a lot of things. I'm hearing some unbelievable things, and the nation is so divided over. I was talking this morning. I've seen him for quite a while, and I just made a general comment about what do you think of all this election and what's going on, and just unloaded. I was about. So be as easy, and all that's fine. I mean, just unbelievable. Everybody's right on the edge, but paying attention. So I think a good number of people. David, that's a great issue. Thank you.
No problem. I like help.
And thank you so much, Dave. Listen, you be careful. Enjoy the holiday.
You too.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. So anyway, we were talking about the Electoral College a little bit, and so after all things that when the Constitution sent out to ratified, Article 2 obviously is the least controversial because it really didn't have an intent in it, which means it didn't have any enemies per se. No on particular issues to axes to grind on that particular a way to kind of thing. It happened, and this is stuff, and I'll just didn't take long for the emergence of 2 parties until he pointed out and that was the president and vice president. The way the Constitution was originally drafted was that all candidates ended a president. The one that got the most be president, the second highest number president. It seemed to make sense. But with the emergence of parties that president and vice president were running as a team. And so what you ran into is controversy with Jefferson and Adams. And then there were all sorts of shenanigans on in the representative. Alexander Hamilton had a distinct role in making sure that the election of 1800 went to Thomas Jefferson rather than John Adams, which was quite a political think about it because and through the 90s issues policy. But on the other hand, Hamilton's conclusion, all the differences I use, is Jeff meant was his pride place. He wants the right things. And so consequently, he would be the best choice for president. So basically what he was saying is, I'm not really comfortable with either of the 2 choices, but if I have to pick one, it's going to be him. And that ultimately drew attention to a flaw in Article 2, selection of the chief executive, that was fixed with an amendment very, very quickly. And that's really what the drafters of the Constitution believed ought to happen. let's see if this works. If it doesn't, and there are certain things that need to be changed, we'll fix it. And they did. In number 68, in Federalist number 68, and we spent quite a bit of time with this a few weeks ago here at the Virtual Center, if you remember, Hamilton made the argument in support of Article 2, in support of the Electoral College. He talked about all the benefits for the Electoral College procedure for choosing the president. But one of the things that is very relevant right now is what role the Electoral College is to play in the process. It has over time become routine. It's become automatic, principally because of the structure, the nature of our two-party system. And what we've done is fall into the pattern of saying each major party has a slate of electors, and whichever candidate wins the popular vote in that state, those will be the electors that will cast the vote for that state for President of the United States. And that meant over the years that the role of the Electoral College almost became insignificant. It was just automatic. And every once in a while, when some elector would step out of line, so to speak, and not vote according to the will of the people of that particular state, it would make news. But it wouldn't be that significant because each state has one vote, and the winning candidate's electors get to cast that vote. So an occasional elector stepping out of line had no significant impact one way or the other. But the reality is, and this is the point of this entire section, it seems to me, the reality is that the founders, those who drafted the Constitution, really believed that the Electoral College would play an integral part in the choice of competent presidents. They really saw the Electoral College as an institutional check on the people's passions. If the people became so passionate about a particular candidate that they tended to overlook the negatives, overlook the issues which needed serious consideration, if a particular candidate was swept into the presidency, as it were, because that candidate was able to excite the people, then there needed to be some way to block that. As Madison said in it's one of the other Federalist Papers. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 39, but I'm not sure. Madison made the point that the reason of the people in a republic, the reason of the people, must always dictate what government does. In other words, the common sense of the electorate needs to carry the day. And government's role in a republic is to follow that logic, that reason, that common sense. But when the passions of the people are driving the process, when it's not the reason of the people, but the passions of the people that has taken over, then government cannot submit to that. At that point, government must intervene and take control of the process. It cannot allow the people to make a horrendous mistake, is what I think most of the delegates at the Constitutional Convention would have included. What that means is that the role of the Electoral College was envisioned to be serious. it was not envisioned to be routine. It was not anticipated that it should be automatic. That rather the electors would serve as a meaningful check on the people's ability to exercise good sense in their choice of a president. Consequently, what the founders believed about the Electoral College and about the behavior of the individual electors in it was that they had a serious job to do. And that job was to go along with the people when what the people indicated they wanted made good sense. But their job equally was to not go along with the will of the people when the people's judgment didn't make good sense. In a sense, then, what that means is the constitutional responsibility of the members of the Electoral College is to evaluate the decision rendered by the voters and make the final determination as to whether this was a wise decision or not. What that means is that the members of the Electoral College right now in these last 5 or 6 days before they make the ultimate decision ought to be critical in how these people behave.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, Bob.
Could I ask a question for clarification?
You sure can. I don't know if I can clarify it. I'll try.
Well, there, when these issues rise up, it seems like they get discussed with an informational cup that is half full at best.
Right.
And so when the Electoral College meets, the only two people under consideration are Trump or Hillary Clinton, right?
Right.
I mean, they couldn't say pull a Romney rabbit out of their hat.
They could, but they would have to organize it, because if it happened just randomly here and there, it wouldn't have any impact.
So,
because each state casts one vote. So in West Virginia, for example, here in West Virginia, where we have three congressional districts and 2 senators. What that means is West Virginia has 5 electoral votes. That means the 5 Republican electors will get together to cast their ballot, West Virginia's ballot for president, and it's going to be Trump. Now,
but that will only count as one vote?
It goes in as one vote, because it's the number of electoral votes assigned to each state. So in other words, West Virginia has 5 electoral votes. So what that means is that West Virginia casts its 5 electoral votes for Trump.
Okay, then
20 states, I think 22 states, have passed state laws which mandate that the electors must vote consistent with the will of the voters.
Is that the will of the voters in their state or the will of the voters nationally?
The will of the voters in this state. The will of the voters in this state.
Okay, I'm getting a little lost here, and this.
Well, it is. It's very confusing. It's very confusing.
Then where does the 270 electoral votes number come in? The magic number.
What you do is you look at the number of electoral votes that each state has been allocated. And 270 is half of that. Is one better than half of that.
Okay, that much I've got.
So what that means is that exactly down the middle would be 269 to 269. That theoretically, the 270 is that's 270th electoral vote is the one that puts you over the corner. So,
but when the Electoral College actually votes, it'll be like 26 to 24.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 30 to whatever. But what they'll do is it'll be the electoral votes. But
well, how then? And I'm really not trying to be obtuse.
No, hey, listen, you're not. I agree with you. This is strange. I've never
how
really thought about this.
How then does it get thrown into the House?
It gets thrown into the House if nobody gets 270.
But the ultimate vote is going to be 26 to 24 or 27 to 23 if each state only gets one vote.
Well,
do you see where I'm getting lost?
I know the confusion is this thing of each state getting one vote versus the 5 electoral votes. That's where the confusion lies. And theoretically, if the state is for Trump, if West Virginia casts its vote for Donald Trump, what that means is 5 votes go into the electoral vote total for Trump. And so when those add up, when it comes to 270, whoever's got it wins it.
All right. Okay. So I think I'm on board with that.
Okay.
Now
that's as much as I know. I mean, but you're right. I mean, this is really confusing. There's absolutely no question.
Well, I used to think I understood how it worked. Now I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Well, this is the way it goes. And it goes into the House if neither of the major candidates totals 270.
So
the way to do that, you could block it with a Romney.
Well, Romney
Romney wouldn't have to beat Trump. All Romney would have to do would be deny 270 to Trump.
Okay, so if we are just working with our paltry little 5 electoral college votes in West Virginia,
right.
Let's say one of them says no.
Right.
The other 4 can't override that. They can't say no. I mean, that vote is that vote, right?
Exactly. But on the other hand, the state would vote for Trump 4-1. But that doesn't mean that Trump would only get 4 votes from West Virginia. It would mean that he'd get all 5, I believe.
And
in other words, the only way that West Virginia's 5 votes could a national would be if 3 of the 5 Republicans voted for Romney or didn't vote for Trump.
Okay, how about Michigan, Pennsylvania? Because if we're going to talk about this scenario, then the faithless, as they're called, they're going to have to some Republican somewhere, big Californians, Oregons, who solidly for Hillary, they're not sure about.
No, and you know they
could they
don't need to be to do that.
Well, and everything is so fluid and time is so short, but I keep thinking about Putin's. Could it be a sufficiently organized thing to?
But it would be really fast, but you're organized. It would say organized.
Democratic states could work with these faithless, presumably faithless Republicans who did the 270, and I'm so alluded, but I'm still getting none of it. What goes in? Okay, is that there's only going to be 2 creation in the electoral goes into the House? I'll bet. I mean, they could Paul Ryan president.
Romney or Paul Ryan could come out of the House. Exactly. Because the House knows things lie.
Or the House, they could say, through the knowledge,
we want Trump. And that's what I think would happen. I mean, and this is just my feeling is if it's going into a House that solidly controls, and I think been doing the transition, controversial as it's been, is really solidifying his control to the point that if it goes, he's
right.
I really don't have any question. So I don't think it almost seems like the point where the thing that could electoral could matter, not only it to Trump, give it to somebody else. And these Republicans choose not to vote for Hillary, and I don't think it's going to happen. That would keep it out of the House because that would be to give Hillary the.
And while we're talking, remember that the number of electoral college votes out at 138 and about 30 notes.
Right.
This is not contrary to what the Trump and the ill-informed people say. The monumentary on his place to squeak and still down something approaching 3 million popular votes.
exactly 2.8, something like that. Yeah.
Which means
I'm going to make. I don't know if you saw it. Profound state what and the fact that the leadership of the Republican Party really some serious to decide this particular thing. Dan Rather makes that relationship Trump and this move towards Russia basically suggests possibility. It's going from relationship, it's relation, and if it's a Putin relationship, we're in trouble. And that's Rather makes that it could be that. If that implies if this is Putin-Trump ship, Trump's appointment of Tillerson would conceivably be really dictated by Putin. In other words, Trump
that's what it looks like.
Who has decided Tillerson would be the best guy for the states. Trump is that Tillerson would be the best to serve the interested states in dealing. That's what he's sending to us. But what Rather is saying is, if Putin is really calling the shots here, it could get into like in fact, Donald Trump or not. But he's to Russia that's actually doing the whole thing. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know that. But the issue is ability.
Well, there's enough evidence. The refusal to his assets, the fact that he has leveraged his value.
Yeah, exactly. It could be, and he won't let us know that. I really think that this audit is a lot of bullshit, to be honest with you. Excuse me, I didn't mean to.
That's okay. You can say that. It's the internet.
Oh, okay.
Well, it is. It is a load of, yeah.
It is because, let's face it. I mean, if the whole nation and the whole world is hanging, let's put that in the front burner.
Let me take it a step further. What if we find, hinges upon Republicans this next year? Would finding out that Trump is brokered in the Ten Commandments and about his relationship with Russian financiers,
right,
would be in 4 weeks Republican coming in. Right. In a course of the Constitution world, would that constitute a high crime or misdemeanor sufficient for
I think it would.
Because the ask is because Jefferson was Job's Turkins in purpose. Because he was off slave, he was able to constantly keep on Monticello and things like that. But the man died a pauper. Yeah. And not wealthy while he might.
Right.
Does being financially insecure right level? My thought is that it doesn't.
That does.
What double
is lying
about it an actual asset of a
foreign power. Because the thinking century, this plays directly into this, Bob. Thinking in the 18th century was the rationale for property qualifications in the first place was that people believed that debt automatically translated into dependency. That only people, only people that were debt could act independently. And this caused poor minimal property qualifications. Because they were indebted to others, that meant that others potentially controlled their behavior, told them who to vote for example. And so the idea is the person that elected president had to be able to depend. That was a gift. If it came out that Liddy is actually in debt interests to the point that he's not calling the shots, then that would be impeachable. That would impeach him, I think.
Okay, so here comes the Lou question. You think the House of Representatives takes its constitutional obligation seriously enough, or are they so far gone ship and what and Hamilton called
right
that they just winked?
Do I mean we've kind of hinted at this before, but never really addressed the question straight on. But my fear is that I do not believe I had a conversation about not the brother about that we were talking, and I believe that Mitch McConnell think they've got the guts to Trump on. I don't.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the first person is who.
Right.
The inquiry
is Paul Ryan. Exactly.
Here's referring bake ever.
Yeah. Well, in his comments last night in Wisconsin, if you heard Trump, and there were a lot of off wasn't he said to the crowd, "Wait a minute, Paul Ryan." Said, "Paul Ryan is like a fine wine. Single day it gets better, and I appreciate more this one's value and country and so this, and really out strong." I think that Trump is well making sure if it did go in. I mean, I don't think he thinks it's going to go into the House, but the fact of the matter, he knows that in Pennsylvania, the all three states together was like 8,000 for them. Dan Rather makes the point you could put that ball stadium. That's how close it was.
Alone, the Jill Stein vote is greater than the margin between Trump.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
so if you don't mind, let me push further.
Sorry.
I want to stay with the impeachment question for a moment, and then I'm just gonna go crazy. 90s, they impeached a Democrat for a consent of sex in his marriage.
Right.
Donald Trail was proved to have admitted to sexual assaults. We know fact has an adulterer in each of his.
Right.
If Donald Trump decides to go out and philander on Noma, or Melania's name is, offense, or does that?
That's a question.
Yes, isn't it? The question and the morals.
And see, ethically, morals, no. Well, the implication of this is impeachment Bill Clinton was legitimate ethically, and it was not. It was political, more than anything else. And it was personal and it was political. And it met of impeachable. This and everybody just looked. The media have made in the 90s a national identification, possible to, for Republicans, but I don't that in itself. Like I don't believe Jefferson being United States and being poor necessarily be president, but it's the lying and denial of the fact that he was poor that I think is the people part of it.
Okay, so. Maybe this, and I would kind of right up against the end of the.
That's good.
But I'd like to just sort of tease a little bit more. Said about stroke versus out it. What we've said about sexual sex acts, whatever. What then? Because the only guidance we have is the Constitution. A high crime, and it doesn't say crimes or misdemeanors. High crimes.
I think it says misdemeanor.
So isn't that conjunctive? Doesn't the high crime misdemeanor?
Right. In other words, the offense needed to be a misdemeanor crime. Marriage is not a high crime. It has and moral implications, clearly, but whether in high crime and misdemeanor, I don't believe it does. But the fact of the matter is, I think the media, the media was public to the point that the definitions terms be pretty well mean. I mean, that was my view.
What's interesting in the Clinton situation is that the polling data indicating Republicans to shut up.
Right. And this I can't his name now read it down as president of Baylor University. He was the lead prosecutor star. Yeah.
Moral compass.
Yeah, God. But so I know. I mean, I think a lot of things that Trump has done during transition. These things constitute possibly impeachment. I mean, if the IRS audit, assuming there is, and Trump's is public, and to be clear in that Trump was so invested in interests in these other things, that his independence to be president of the United States would be compromised. If he did to keep that, would be my feeling. But that he's poor in and of itself would not be. In fact, he knew that and he did everything he meant that the president circle that there was a effect to his. Because if it comes down to this on this issue, these guys are going. I don't really believe guys are going to stay him. I think point like they was. I don't think that they would have. But now talking about which could work itself into a situation where actually stand up. I think the partisanship issue would dominate that. I really do. I think most of these guys would full excuses and reasons not to do it. Ability of the country and all the point to Al Gore. And his choice in 2000 election not for it, to move on, let the country move on and all of these other things. I would say basically that we need to take a page from Al Gore and beyond this and move on. Let this man be president, et cetera, et cetera. They would do that. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. So just to share one, because if nothing, these sorts do it people to try to understand a little better how the government works. Operates.
And the is that, I mean, no way in the world the founders could have anticipated all these situations. I mean, the beauty of the Constitution is the specific handbill without being so specific that it's what will happen. And it leaves room in people like the one we've just forward together. But I think the issue has made it. But what we've got now is a finger pointing with I passed weekend on, it was Monday, the day we did the program this week. I had Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC that day, and she had Kelly Conway on. Casting the mouth grapes, and these people can't just this man won one of the real victories of the nation and need to move on. They need to get beyond the program. And so Beijing was that only was she trashing that the question Trump thing, but she was trashing fight race in the future, saying everybody is saying against when everything that they against him in the future is all sour grapes. And so basically what was a decision made by the Trump, all of them go out there works. Basically get issue all the people, the behavior activities of Donald Trump as so a loser, and thereby the soul out of anything they might come up with. It's a brilliant political, but excuse me, but I really think that's what's happening. That's why even if the Electoral College some throw this representative, I think we'd be dealing some of these curtains in the House of Representatives, some of these Tea Parties people that the candidate from Tennessee, I've seen her on in the
Marsha
Blackburn. Oh, it's Salem lives. I mean, she's incredible. And with that, seems to be going. I may be wrong. But anyway.
Well, we need to take a break, and we'll do that. And yourself a coffee.
Well,
I'm roaring back, Bill.
All right, Bob, everybody. Listening to we're going to take a 5 right now and give everybody a chance, including me, to around a little bit and come back and we'll center. Thank you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Turn to the virtual center fusion and so to hear again, Bill O'Brien.
Again, and welcome to our 2. It'll be a little busier than it was. We've into the second hour. I'll come to thank Bob for his contribution first hour and made the initial call on the Electoral College. I think it's pretty obvious. They haven't been coughing Neil as I did, but on the other, they haven't been that either. It's a good thing, bad thing type of thing, and I'd much prefer the good thing. So with it, I can to put up this. Welcome back to the verse, and we do share with us on these issues, if indeed the issue that Bob and I discussed on that fancy, and I think it's right now. By all means, feel free. The phone number is 804-646-76. 304-663-4676. My email address, if you repeat that way, is O'Brien, not gmail.com. That's Brian, OBRIEN 906 @com. Our Facebook encourage you to take advantage of it. There are 2 or 3 issues that I'll be dealing with. We'll cover them here in our second hour. That really began book page with a particular link to an article that seemed to raise that I believed that I might be able to add a little bit of context to, or a little bit of background to. And that's the reason that I've decided first to put them on Facebook, and secondly to devote airtime here at the Virtual Center to them. If you go to Facebook, go to the search box and just type in For the Constitution, and you will be in page. And there are a number of postings there that I've the last days. I've not been doing live. I've been going through, working the internet and keep up with my. The one thing that I will say is, in fact, I think I made this comment at the end of a Facebook yesterday evening, and that is, Donald Trump is coming, because there's more on there. And I think, to be honest with you, becoming critically important to even cautious before about what, because I think one of the things that become very clear with, and I think Hillary Clinton devoted comments in her last appearance this past weekend on this issue, is the idea of Facebook that's outlawing truths. It's having, and part of that impact is that people are this, they see it in print, it's true. It's been and truth of it has been established that that's true. So again, it's incredibly important that as more and more information is available to us, that we become a lot screening that from not falling for the weak. I'm very honest with you that we had first hour about what might happen if it went into the House of Representatives and all of that. A lot of it by the fact that perception, and I don't know that it's accurate perception, that a lot of people that make faulty evidence. With the president-elect, doesn't even want evidence. He rejects data. He the briefings. That ultimately, it seems to me the ultimate behavior of an authoritarian. I heard several people that this is a God complex. Well, the fact of the matter is, if God complex, you believe that you already know. No information, no data that you could possibly be exposed to would matter. That's the behavior that I know where I'm going and what. Don't give me any info because I don't want to hear it. And one of the most thoughtful that I've late, and I want to go back and kind of bring it to the piles, is this idea of what's truth. That there's some truth matters, and that's, and the people doing it don't eat what they're doing. The matter is what they are is that they are trashing, they are dismissing the process that has adopted established document truth. In other words, are trashing the whole idea of the pursuit of the assumptions upon, and they're basically that truth is not the result of what we would find in laboratory or research or applying reason and common seeing the best minds on a particular topic, even though the entire during the Enlightenment adopts us. That strategy is the accepted with what is who choose to reject that, reject the fact that it's truth. And they look to the amendment to do it. And the assumption is it's a free country, as I think the president-elect made the comment the other day. Look, I'm stupid. I'm smart. I need to know what I need to know. I need to know what I'm. And what that is reject the wished international towards the pursuit of truth. And for me, as the one that's bugging me the recent days and weeks, how do you deal with that? I've been raised in a world which can't even get our arms around that. We can't even grasp that. But we are a product of a system culture that accepts the legitimacy of the way we pursue it, the way we do research, the way we and to address to dish that, to just reject him, and instead replace it with passion, proceed as it were, is something we can deal with. We deal. Decisions being made is those kinds of rationalizations. I would suggest to you that it poses a real problem. I think it's this as an issue center, but it's very because it gets some of the major questions in the major relation of the way we define them, the way we evaluate alternative. I think one of the teaching started a few weeks ago, but I'm senior citizens class on Friday on dialogue and heart that Jefferson in his letter to Maria Card in 1886. This group of seniors, there are about 25, 26 of us, and they're fascinated by this. Because what Jefferson is talking about, dialogue from the fact of the matter, there's kind of interaction of it to make the best decision. That in spite of the fact that on the sea is almost the Jefferson a position of bring one over the other, over the head, clearly that and what he's really suggests the best decisions are the products, the joint surround those two together. And really that partisanship cult in our political a partisan is making substantive really call for and conversation, as it were, so that we could all learn together by discussing a particular issue. Instead, either or guys, big guys, those us speak, really work against the processes that have generally been accepted to be man's way to solve his problems. And I think all of us have to recognize there's no document in at least there's a better example than that the Constitution of the United States. Madison and Hamilton recently in the Federalist talking about comments and human nature is, and you expect to anticipate behavior and all of these other based on a standing issues and concepts by a process, not flying by the seat of your pants, which is being asked to. The danger of that is the very point in that process is that once you make the decision that flying is okay, you can deal with the fact they're capable of flying. What you want them is just the fact that they're capable of doing that and doing it well. They've done an upper class and related everything upon everything. To believe that this is an important issue. Excuse me. This is Facebook, I believe, and I want to call your attention to it because it was a little letter to the editor that appeared in the Washington Post. Excuse me. It was written by from the state of named Keith Bertman. He's a resident of Bloomfield, Michigan, and he wrote this letter. It's on specific. It's on written about Donald, and it points to the fact that a conservative, independent candidate for the United States who really never garnered any votes or any attention at all, named Evan McMullin, a candidate for president, candidate conservative, wrote an op-ed post. It said July on, and basically he entitled his op-ed piece "Trump's Threat to the Constitution." That article, he was saying majors that Trump's camp only through the but even position behaviors that was suggesting Trump was violent or suggesting that freedom significant aspects of the Constitution of the mind of Evan McMullin for president. This was worth addressing in an op-ed piece. McMullin begins in 7th of July meeting, a Republican unity meeting held in Washington, D.C. Trump was leaders of the Republican Party in both and this tried to get the mainstream party by his candidate was try to bring and party together on the 7th of July. At that meeting, Donald addressing issues with questions and a woman and about the Constitution. She questions about whether in fact he was made on the campaign trail suggested a Constitution of the United States. According to McMullin, Trump began to answer the question before she even got it all out, before she even asked it. And he answered the question, the idea of America great again, with a series of generalizations that really didn't say anything. Firm commitment to the Constitution and all of it straight up. The rest of his comments, he supported all aspects of the Constitution, even 12. The fact of the matter is, there is no article in the United States. McMullin gives that story in his piece, post. To make the he decided point what Donald Trump really was. He concluded that it was smoke, that he read whatever people hear, that he had little meant to the answer. He was telling them here most of what he's saying had some of it wrong, convenient. It included lies, and he basically said at that point he realized his candidacy posed to the Constitution of the United States. And he included a paragraph which he got into specifics of his concerns with Trump. Let me share with you if I can. McMullin said the following about the way that Trump was dealing with the Constitution. He had questioned judicial independence, threatened the freedom of the press, called for violations of equal protection law, promised the torture, and attacked Americans on the and religion. He had undermined critical democratic norms, peaceful debate and power, commitment to truth, freedom from foreigners, and abstention from the use of political illusion. All of these are included in the Constitution of the United States. Trump had challenged everything. He had basically said that he was constrained by them. Mullen makes the article that during the 7th unity meeting, in one of the people that rose to ask Donald Trump a question was the Senate from Arizona. He had never met Donald Trump before, so began by introducing himself to Donald, and he, as Arizona that was and didn't serve 5 years in a prison of war camp. Immediately off on Flake, accused of being a senator or representing Arizona and people, and made the prediction that if he had anything to do about it, Flake would not be reelected. It so happened that this particular Flake was not even up for reelection. And then the same happened to Senator from Illinois, a senator from Illinois. And Trump is threatening to his position as prospective nominee of the Republican Party against his enemies, against people who had challenged him. And as Evan McMullin makes clear in this paragraph, the use of executive power for political retribution is unconstitutional. So that's the fifth piece. What brought all of this letter to the editor in the Post yesterday, because in the letter referred back to the fifth piece by Evan McMullin, Trump's threat to the Constitution of the United States. And then he told a story, and that substance of the letter to the editor. He talked about more specifically the authoritarian Trump, the extent to which Donald Trump clearly gave indications that he was an autocrat, that he was a dictator, that he saw himself as above the law, above the Constitution, above the constraints of the Constitution. But the purpose of Bertman's letter, was to make the point about the dangers of authoritarianism as reflected in the candidacy in the transition, coming transition of Donald Trump. The story he shared was the story of the frog. And he makes the point that the story is often told about the fact that if you have a pot of boiling water on the stove and you drop a live frog into it, the frog is going to jump out in order to escape the intense heat. In other words, the frog is going to react to the danger. But on the other hand, if you have a pot of cold water on the stove and you drop a live frog into it, the frog will not make an effort to get out. And then if you turn the heat on and you gradually heat up that pot of water, the frog will not respond. It will not respond to what's gradual. It'll only respond to what's immediate. And of course, Bertman's point was that that's the threat of authoritarianism. It happens gradually, one step at a time. And that is his concern, that is the threat that he believes Donald Trump poses to the Constitution of the United States. He closes his letter with this sentence: like the proverbial frog in the pot, the American people are each day becoming more and more accustomed to the rise of authoritarianism, one small, seemingly insignificant degree at a time. Unquote. When I shared that story with my brother last evening on the phone, he immediately reminded me of the Holocaust and how part of the occupation and the mistreatment of Jews in Europe was based on this kind of gradual psychological warfare, where you would get people into a frame of mind that they were willing to accept more and more and more and not react. Because every action is not that much different from what people have become used to happening. So therefore, it's only a little thing. It's not worth raising an issue about. But gradually, piece by piece, step by step, the process changes. And people are gradually becoming accustomed to things that they would never accept. It was presented to them in one fell swoop. That particular letter to the editor, when I read it yesterday, I thought that's one I've got to share with our audience, our folks at the Virtual Center, because I think it's a real one, and it speaks to what's happening. It speaks, and I can attest to this because I sat through it this during this campaign myself, and I watched it happen. And I watched Donald Trump talking about how, compared to some of the other things that ISIS was doing, waterboarding was not even torture. And that if he got elected, he would not only resume waterboarding, he would go much further than that. And basically, what we were into, if you remember, during the outbreaks of ISIS-inspired violence in this country and in the world, was that people were afraid, and they were looking for answers, and they were looking for somebody that would protect us from this terror that was engulfing the world. And here was a candidate who promised to do it, who basically said more than once, I can fix it. What have you got to lose? What we have now is not working. Give me a chance. And in the process, what he was basically doing was putting on suspension all of these constitutional principles that had become so much a part of our constitutional framework in this country. I really think it's very, very significant, and it's something that all of us need to take very, very seriously. During the conversation we had, I have an issue, a pretty significant issue, but I think I'm gonna hold it until our next program. It deals specifically with the situation going on over the phone call, congratulating Donald Trump from the Prime Minister, the President of Taiwan. That happened a few weeks ago, if you remember, right after the election. We talked about this before a couple of weeks ago, but the issue has resurfaced. And it resurfaced in large part because of Donald Trump's appearance this past Sunday morning with Chris Wallace on Fox News. The issue of Taiwan came up in that conversation. And in response to it, Donald Trump made some statements about the situation in the Far East, about our relationship with China, and the whole status of Taiwan, that seemed to me brought this entire issue back to the front burner. I want to deal with it, but I think it's an issue that's probably going to take more time than we have left in our program today, because we're rapidly moving towards, we're close to 45 minutes after the hour. So we're operating with less than 15 minutes left, and I don't want to get into that issue and then have to stop midstream, wait 5 days, and then resurrect it, if you will. So I think what I'll try to do is hold it, because it gets into the whole issue of American foreign policy, and I'd like to do something about that with that, because I do believe that I might have a few things to contribute in the area of American foreign policy and its history that might put this whole issue into context and help all of us recognize just how serious it is. I think it's a real one. I think it's big. And I'd like to address that, but I'd rather have more time to do it. So instead, let me go back to the conversation that we had with Bob and I had in our first hour, focused around the Electoral College. And one of the things that came up in that conversation was speculation, because we don't really know about what is going on, what might be going on in terms of the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, in terms of prospective relationships, if you will, between the United States and Russia and China, and Russia's priorities and intent in international affairs. And in the course of the conversation with Bob, the question came up about Donald Trump's tax returns and the fact that his refusal to release his tax returns because of the ongoing audit. And so consequently, we really don't know what Donald Trump's financial situation really is. We know what he says it is, but we also know that much of what he says is not worth a whole lot. So the fact of the matter is, as Bob pointed out, it could be that Donald Trump is so financially involved with the Soviets that in effect he has ceased to be and ceased to respond and be able to act independently. In essence, if he has become so indebted to Russian financial and industrial interests that they really control his behavior, control what he does, what he says, then we talked about it as whether in fact revelation of that would constitute an impeachable offense. I think Bob and I both agreed it would. In the course of that, I mentioned an interview with Dan Rather that just occurred a day or two ago. And I thought that it might be a good place here to bring up this issue of the interview with Dan Rather. Because Dan Rather raises this issue about U.S.-Russian relations, Trump-Putin relations. And in that interview, Dan Rather made the point, excuse me, and this is a quote, "The question now is whether this will be a Trump-Putin administration or a Putin-Trump administration. In other words, who'll be calling the shots?" Remember, during the campaign, we had the same debate talking about Donald Trump versus the leadership of the Republican Party. We were talking about whether, in fact, bringing the two together, creating unity between the Republican leadership and Donald Trump, would result in a Republican-controlled Donald Trump or a Trump-controlled Republican Party. And we talked about which it was. And specifically, we focused it on Paul Ryan and Donald Trump. And it appears, looking back, that's, of course, one of the benefits of hindsight, now that we have the advantage of looking back on this, it's become very clear that Donald Trump ended up calling the shots. And the Republican Party establishment is pretty much being forced to come to him because, as president-elect, he's calling the shots. He's the one that's dictating the transition. The question that Dan Rather raises in the difference between a Trump-Putin administration and a Putin-Trump administration, it raises the question as to whether the Secretary of State, the appointment of recommendation of Tillerson, president of ExxonMobil, for that position of Secretary of State, whether in fact that's a Trump decision or whether in fact it might be a Putin decision. Because Tillerson has very good relationships with Putin. And in Wisconsin last evening, on the so-called victory tour that Trump is making, he made the point in defending the Tillerson nomination that the best way to deal with Russia is to be talking with them. Tillerson can talk with them. He knows them. He's done business with them. They trust him. Therefore, the best way to deal with Russia, Trump was saying, is with the Tillerson nomination. So there's no question that Trump, before the American public, Trump is taking responsibility for the Tillerson nomination. But the question that Rather raises is whether, in fact, that might be a cover or not, and whether this is really a Putin decision. We won't know that. Basically, though, what bothers Dan Rather is the responsibility on the Republican leadership to look at Russian relations seriously, to look at the Putin situation seriously, and not try to sweep under the rug some of the realities of Vladimir Putin's background. Dan Rather reminds us that Putin was a KB agent under the Soviet Union. In that role, he was guilty of serious crimes, crimes against humanity. The situation in Syria, Russia's role in Syria, in Assad's crushing of his opposition with support from the Soviet Union. From Russia. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. So the question is, given what's happening, given the bombings of civilians, and given the slaughter and brutality of the reports coming out of Syria, a lot of this can clearly end up on Putin's doorstep. Is it ethical to ignore those things when considering the Tillerson nomination? Or should all of those things be considered? And is it the responsibility of the Republican leadership to consider them during the process of nominating him as Secretary of State? Dan Rather closes his interview with this paragraph, and I wanted to share it with you because there's an awful lot in it. I didn't pull out excerpts from it because, to tell you the truth, there's too much in it that needs to stay in it. So I'm going to share with you the entire thing. Quote, Dan Rather says, I am struck to the point of extreme disappointment by the complicit silence of Republicans, is what he's saying. Ronald Reagan is rolling over in his grave. This is Russia. A newly aggressive, assertive Russia. Yes, we the people need new thinking and fresh approaches for dealing with Russia of today. But this has to be weighed against the fact that Putin is a former KGB officer, and has done things indicative of a demagogic strongman. Throw in the evidence of serious tampering with the recent U.S. presidential election, and what you have is the making of a global strategic showdown over American ideals. The craven calculus of too many Republicans at this point seems to be that pursuing a reactionary policy portfolio that now includes gutting Medicare and Social Security is more important than the fact that a foreign power has meddled in an election decided in 3 states by a total vote that, as somebody I read noted, could fit into a college football stadium, unquote. The number that I've seen is 80,000 votes from those 3 states. Trump's victory in the Electoral College was contingent on his winning Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania with a total popular vote of something in the area of 80,000. The only conclusion we can draw from that is if 80,000 votes is the number that put Donald Trump into the White House, then if we know absolutely that Russians tampered with our election, then there's no way we can deny that that tampering played a direct role in the outcome of the election. There's no way that we can deny that the Comey letter did. The point is that serious substantive evidence here that members of the Electoral College need to take seriously, need to consider seriously. Federalist number 68, the Constitution of the United States, assigned them that responsibility. This is not a political responsibility we're asking people to assume for political reasons. This is a constitutional responsibility assigned to them by the Constitution of the United States when they took the oath to be an elector. So it seems to me that all the evidence raises serious questions about just how automatic this performance by the Electoral College on Monday ought to be. In spite of the fact that I don't think a whole lot would happen if the thing was thrown into the House of Representatives. The fact of the matter is, what it would do would be to delay. And maybe at this point, delay is the best thing we can hope for. Because more and more information daily is surfacing on this issue of Russian hacking into the electoral process. With that, I think it's time for us to think about signing off. We're at 58 minutes after the hour. We've got less than 2 minutes to go in today's program. I want to thank you so much for listening, but most importantly, I want to thank you for putting up with me and these interruptions. I apologize for them, but I have to say that I'm very pleased about today's program. And for that, I have a lot to thank Bob Kincaid for, him and David in the call in our first hour. I really appreciate the intensity of the conversation. It kind of got me off on a coughing jag a little bit, but that's because I was animated, and I'd rather be animated than just not coughing. If I have to cough a little bit in order to be animated, I'm willing to do that. I hope you all have a wonderful week and weekend. And all things working out, we'll be back together again the first of next week. This is Bill O'Brien for the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Have a great evening, a great week and weekend, and Lord willing, we'll be back together on Monday. Thank you.